On that rainy night, an invisible girl heard a call no one else noticed. She rescued a baby with her own arms, and in doing so, exposed a woman willing to do anything to erase a life. While the city watched in shock, the millionaire rediscovered faith in humanity in the eyes of a child. The fine rain fell over Seattle like a translucent veil, turning the city into a watercolor painting of grays and blues. On the puddle-strewn sidewalks of the Rainier Valley neighborhood, 10-year-old Lily Morgan walked barefoot, her worn-out sneakers dangling from her fingers. They were her only pair, and she couldn't risk getting them soaked through. The cold pavement sent shivers up her spine, but she had grown accustomed to discomfort. Lily's honey-colored hair was tied back with a faded ribbon that had once been bright red, now dulled by time and numerous washes in cold water. Her dress, a hand-me-down from the church donation bin, hung loosely on her thin frame. Despite her circumstances, there was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself, a resilience that shone through her amber eyes. She was used to scavenging for leftovers at farmers' markets and rummaging through clean dumpsters behind the bakeries that tossed out day-old bread. But today felt different. There was an unusual restlessness in the air that made her walk faster, an inexplicable pull that guided her feet in a direction she rarely took. Lily found herself in Madison Park, one of Seattle's wealthiest neighborhoods, where mansions overlooked Lake Washington with their manicured lawns and private docks. She knew she didn't belong here. The occasional glance from a passing car or a gardener working on a front lawn reminded her of that fact. Yet something kept her walking, turning corners, moving deeper into the labyrinth of affluence. As she rounded a corner near the towering iron gates of what appeared to be the largest mansion on the block, she heard something. A sound so faint that it might have been the wind or her imagination. But Lily stopped, her heart suddenly racing. She tilted her head, listening intently. There it was again, a whimper, a cry, a baby's cry. It came from behind the property, near a side garage hidden partially by overgrown rhododendrons. Through the ornate bars of the fence, Lily could see what looked like an abandoned car covered with a tarp, situated behind the garage, almost completely obscured from view of the main house. For a moment she hesitated. This wasn't her neighborhood. This wasn't her business. If someone caught her peeking through the gates of a mansion, they might call the police. And Lily knew what happened to poor kids who got in trouble. Her friend Marcus had been taken away by Child Protective Services last year after being caught shoplifting a candy bar. He never came back to the neighborhood, but the cry came again, weaker this time, more desperate. Something in that sound broke through Lily's fear. With a quick glance around to ensure no one was watching, she squeezed through a gap in the ornate fence, where two bars had slightly bent apart, just wide enough for her small body to slip through. Her heart pounding against her ribs, Lily crept toward the sound. The wet grass soaked her feet as she moved silently across the vast lawn, staying close to the hedges to remain hidden. When she reached the tarp-covered car, she hesitated again. The crying had stopped, and in its absence, doubt crept in. What if she was mistaken? What if this was a trap? But an instinct stronger than fear pushed her forward. With trembling fingers, Lily lifted a corner of the tarp and peered inside the car. Through the foggy window, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A baby, no more than a few months old, wrapped in a sweat-soaked blanket, its tiny face streaked with tears, lips parched and bluish. The infant's eyes were half closed, exhausted from crying, its little chest rising and falling with shallow, rapid breaths. "Oh my God," Lily whispered, her words a cloud of vapor in the cool air. Without thinking twice, she tried the car door, locked. She knocked on the window, hoping to rouse the baby, to see more signs of life. The infant's eyes flickered open momentarily, then closed again. Lily looked around desperately for something to break the window with, but stopped herself. The sound would surely alert someone in the house. Instead, she tried the other doors, circling the car in growing panic. The back door on the driver's side moved slightly under her pull. It wasn't completely latched. With renewed hope, Lily tugged harder and the door creaked open. The smell hit her first. Sour milk, soiled diaper, and something else, something sickly that made her stomach turn. The baby lay on the back seat, unrestrained, rolling slightly as the door opened. It was a boy, Lily could tell from the blue onesie, now darkened with sweat and other fluids. His wispy blonde hair was plastered to his forehead, and his skin had a greyish tinge that frightened her. "Hey, little one," she whispered, reaching in to touch his cheek. "It was hot, too hot and dry. I'm going to help you. I promise." Lily glanced toward the mansion. Should she run to the front door and ring the bell? But what if whoever had put the baby here was inside? What if they had done this on purpose? The thought chilled her more than the rain that now seeped through her thin cotton dress. No, she decided. The baby needed help now. Professional help. With gentle hands, she gathered the infant in her arms, blanket and all, and cradled him against her chest. "I've got you," she murmured, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've got you now." Slipping back through the fence the way she had come, Lily began to run. The nearest hospital was Harborview Medical Center, at least 20 blocks away. In her mind, she calculated the quickest route, avoiding the streets where police cars often patrolled. The baby felt like a burning coal against her chest, his breath faint against her neck. "Stay with me," she pleaded as she ran, her bare feet slapping against the wet pavement. "Please stay with me." The rain fell harder now, drenching them both. Lily used her body to shield the infant as best she could, hunching over him protectively. People on the streets turned to stare at the bedraggled girl running with a bundle in her arms, but no one stopped her. No one offered help. In Seattle, as in most big cities, people had learned to mind their own business, to look away from things that might complicate their day. By the time Lily reached Cherry Street, her lungs were burning and her legs felt like rubber. But she didn't slow down. The baby had been quiet for too long, his little body limp in her arms. Fear gave her a second wind, propelling her forward with renewed strength. When the imposing facade of Harborview Medical Center finally came into view, Lily could have wept with relief. She staggered through the sliding doors of the emergency entrance, her voice hoarse as she called out, "Help! Please help! This baby needs help!" The fluorescent lights of the emergency room momentarily blinded her. Faces turned, voices raised in alarm, and suddenly there were hands reaching for the bundle in her arms, voices asking questions she was too exhausted to answer. "Found empty car, locked, hot," she managed between gasps for air. A nurse with kind eyes took the baby from her arms, and a team in scrubs immediately surrounded the infant. Their voices urgent but controlled, as they whisked him through a set of double doors. Another nurse led Lily to a chair, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and offering her a cup of water. "What's your name, honey?" the nurse asked, her voice gentle but her eyes assessing. "Lily," she replied, her teeth chattering from cold and shock. "Lily Morgan. Is the baby going to be okay?" The nurse squeezed her shoulder. "They're doing everything they can. Now, can you tell me where you found him?" As Lily began to recount her story, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A tall man in an expensive suit burst through the doors, his face a mask of panic and desperation. Behind him, a security guard and what appeared to be a chauffeur struggled to keep up. "My son!" the man shouted, his voice echoing through the waiting room. "They said my son was brought here. Noah Bradley, 9 months old. Where is he?" The nurse attending to Lily straightened, her professional demeanor taking over. "Sir, please come with me. Your son is being treated by our pediatric team." As the man was led toward the same doors through which the baby had disappeared, he turned and for a brief moment his eyes locked with Lily's. In that instant, something passed between them, a recognition, a connection that neither could explain. Then he was gone, swallowed by the sterile corridors of the hospital, leaving Lily alone with her wet clothes, her trembling hands, and the weight of what she had just done pressing upon her small shoulders. Little did she know that this rainy afternoon, this spontaneous act of courage, would alter the course of not just her life, but the lives of everyone connected to the tiny baby she had rescued from certain disaster. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the Seattle streets, washing away footprints and secrets alike, but some things couldn't be erased so easily. Some connections once made were impossible to break, and some acts of kindness contained within them the power to unravel carefully constructed webs of deception, exposing the truth that lay hidden beneath layers of wealth and privilege. For now, though, Lily simply waited, her thoughts with the baby boy with wispy blonde hair and the desperate father who had appeared like a storm in the quiet emergency room. She closed her eyes and said a silent prayer, something her grandmother had taught her to do in times of uncertainty. And she wondered what would happen next, unaware that she had just taken the first step on a journey that would transform her life in ways she could never have imagined. The pediatric emergency unit of Harborview Medical Center hummed with controlled chaos as doctors and nurses worked frantically around the tiny form of Noah Bradley. Dr. Elaine Chen, the attending physician, barked orders with the precision of someone who had seen too many children in crisis. IV fluids wide open. He's severely dehydrated. Get a blood gas, electrolytes, and a full metabolic panel. Core temperature is 103.2. Let's get him cooled down gradually. Outside in the waiting room, Lily sat with her feet barely touching the floor, still wrapped in the hospital blanket. A social worker named Miss Patel had joined her, asking gentle but probing questions that Lily answered truthfully, despite her fear of authorities. "So you found the baby in a car behind a mansion in Madison Park?" Ms. Patel clarified, her pen poised above her notepad. Lily nodded, her damp hair falling into her eyes. It was covered with a tarp, like someone didn't want it to be found. "The baby was all alone and he looked really sick." "And you didn't see anyone around? No one came out of the house when you took the baby?" "No, ma'am. The house looked empty, but it was so big I guess someone could have been inside and not heard him crying." Ms. Patel's eyes softened. "What you did was very brave, Lily. Not many people would have risked getting into trouble to help a stranger's child." Lily looked down at her hands. "I couldn't just leave him there. He was so little and—" Her voice trailed off as the double doors swung open, and the tall man in the expensive suit emerged, his face ashen. Behind him walked a doctor in scrubs, still talking to him in a low voice. "Mr. Bradley, your son is stabilizing. We've started him on IV fluids to combat the dehydration, and we're monitoring his temperature closely. The next few hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Robert Bradley nodded mechanically, running a hand through his sandy hair. "And you're sure there's no permanent damage?" "It's too early to say with absolute certainty, but infants are remarkably resilient. The fact that he was found when he was well, it made all the difference." Robert's eyes swept the waiting room until they landed on Lily. Recognition flickered across his face, and he strode toward her with purpose. Ms. Patel stood, positioning herself slightly in front of Lily in a protective gesture. "Mr. Bradley, I presume. I'm Sonia Patel from Child Protective Services. This is Lily Morgan, the young lady who brought your son to the hospital." Robert barely acknowledged the social worker, his attention fixed entirely on Lily. He knelt down to her level, his expensive suit wrinkling as he did so, and took her small hands in his much larger ones. "You saved my son's life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to begin to thank you." Up close, Lily could see the red rims around his eyes and the stubble on his jaw that suggested he hadn't shaved in days. Despite his obvious wealth, there was something broken about him, something vulnerable that made her squeeze his hands in return. "Is Noah going to be okay?" she asked, surprising herself by remembering the baby's name from his earlier outburst. A flicker of surprise crossed Robert's face, followed by a ghost of a smile. "The doctors think so, yes. Thanks to you." "Mr. Bradley," Ms. Patel interjected, "I understand this is an emotional moment, but I need to ask you some questions about how your son came to be in that situation." The warmth in Robert's eyes cooled instantly, replaced by something harder, more guarded. He released Lily's hands and stood once again, towering over them both. "Of course, but first I need to make some calls. My wife and our nanny need to be informed that Noah has been found." He pulled a sleek phone from his pocket and stepped away, his voice dropping to a murmur as he made his calls. Lily watched him, a nagging feeling in her stomach. Something wasn't right. The way he had said "my wife" carried an edge that didn't match the relief of a man whose child had just been rescued. Miss Patel seemed to sense it too. She sat back down beside Lily, her voice lowered. "Lily, did you notice anything else unusual when you found the baby? Anything at all that seemed strange?" Lily thought back to the scene, the tarp-covered car, the secluded location behind the garage, the locked doors. "It felt like someone put him there on purpose," she said slowly. "Not like he was forgotten, like he was hidden." Ms. Patel's expression remained neutral, but she wrote something in her notepad. Before she could ask another question, the hospital doors slid open again, and two figures rushed in, A glamorous blonde woman in designer clothes and a younger woman with a practical ponytail and sensible shoes. "Robert!" the blonde called out, her voice carrying across the waiting room. "Oh my God, is it true? They found Noah?" Robert turned, and Lily saw his body stiffen almost imperceptibly before he composed himself and nodded. "Yes, Victoria. He's being treated now. He's going to be all right." Victoria Bradley rushed to her husband, throwing her arms around his neck in a display of emotion that somehow seemed rehearsed to Lily's observant eyes. The other woman, presumably the nanny, stood awkwardly to the side, her hands clasped tightly together, her face a mixture of relief and... was that fear? "Sarah," Robert addressed the nanny, his voice carefully controlled. "The police will want to speak with you about Noah's disappearance. And with both of you," he added, his eyes shifting to his wife. Victoria pulled back, her perfectly made-up face showing confusion. "The police? But we found him. That's what matters. It was just a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding that nearly cost our son his life," Robert replied, each word measured and cold. Ms. Patel stood and approached the group, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "Mrs. Bradley, I'm Sonia Patel from CPS. We're working with the police to understand how Noah ended up locked in a car on your property." Victoria's gaze darted from Ms. Patel to Robert, then to Lily, who still sat wrapped in the hospital blanket. Something dangerous flashed in her eyes when she looked at Lily, something that made the girl instinctively shrink back in her seat. "And who is this?" Victoria asked, her voice honeyed but her eyes hard. "This is Lily Morgan," Robert answered before Ms. Patel could speak. "She found Noah and brought him to the hospital. She saved his life." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, aren't you a little hero? But I have to wonder what a child like you was doing on our property in the first place." The implied accusation hung in the air. Ms. Patel stepped forward, her voice firm. "Mrs. Bradley, Lily acted with extraordinary courage and compassion. Without her intervention, the outcome for your stepson would have been tragic." The word stepson seemed to hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, smoothing her expression into one of appropriate concern. Of course. We're all just so upset by this whole ordeal. Sarah and I have been out of our minds with worry, haven't we, Sarah?" The nanny nodded mutely, her eyes fixed on the floor. Just then, a police officer entered the waiting room, his presence immediately commanding attention. Detective Marcus Rivera introduced himself and requested to speak with each of them individually, starting with Robert. As Robert followed the detective to a more private area, he paused beside Lily's chair. "Don't go anywhere," he said quietly. "Please. I want to talk to you again when this is sorted out." Lily nodded, even though she wasn't sure she had anywhere to go. Her grandmother would be worried sick by now. She had been gone for hours, and Grandma Maggie had no way of knowing where she was. They didn't own a cell phone, and their landline had been disconnected months ago when they couldn't pay the bill. "Ms. Patel," she said timidly, "I need to let my grandma know I'm okay. She'll be really worried." The social worker's expression softened. "Of course, Lily, give me her number and I'll call her right away." Lily hesitated. "We don't have a phone anymore. She's at our apartment on Rainier Avenue, the one above the laundromat." Ms. Patel frowned slightly but nodded. "I'll send someone to inform her in person. Is there anyone else at home with her?" "No, ma'am. It's just me and Grandma Maggie. She's sick a lot, so I take care of things mostly." Something in Ms. Patel's expression changed, a professional concern replacing her previous warmth. Lily recognized that look. It was the same one Marcus's social worker had worn before he was taken away. "I'm not going to be taken away, am I?" she asked, her voice small but direct. "Grandma needs me." Before Ms. Patel could answer, Victoria Bradley approached them, her designer heels clicking on the linoleum floor. She had composed herself, her face a mask of gracious concern. "Ms. Patel, I couldn't help overhearing. It sounds like Lily and her grandmother are in a difficult situation. Perhaps I could help? As a thank you for what she did for Noah." Ms. Patel regarded Victoria with professional skepticism. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Bradley, but we have protocols for situations like this." Victoria waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Of course you do. But surely there's no harm in offering some assistance. A gift card for groceries, perhaps? Or maybe some new clothes for our little hero here." There was something insincere in her voice that made Lily's skin crawl. Victoria's eyes never met hers directly, always looking slightly past her, as if she couldn't bear to actually see the girl who had disrupted whatever plan had been set in motion. "Thank you, but we're okay," Lily said firmly, surprising both women. "My grandma and I managed just fine." Victoria's smile tightened at the corners. "Well, isn't that admirable? Such independence in one so young." The conversation was interrupted by the return of Robert and Detective Rivera. Robert's face was grim, his jaw set in a way that suggested he was holding back strong emotion. "Victoria, the detective would like to speak with you next," he said, his voice clipped. As Victoria followed Detective Rivera, she cast one last glance at Lily, a look so filled with quiet malice that it made Lily's breath catch in her throat. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that Victoria Bradley was somehow responsible for what had happened to baby Noah. And judging by the way Robert watched his wife walk away, his eyes narrow and calculating, he suspected it too. The hospital waiting room fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional announcement over the PA system and the muffled sounds of medical equipment from beyond the double doors. Lily pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, suddenly feeling the weight of what she had stumbled into, a family drama far more complex and dangerous than she could have imagined when she first heard that faint cry coming from beneath a tarp-covered car. The rain continued to fall outside, pattering against the windows like distant applause. Somewhere in the hospital, baby Noah was fighting to recover from his ordeal. And here in the waiting room, the first threads of truth were beginning to unravel, exposing a tapestry of secrets that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. The pediatric ward of Harborview Medical Center was quieter than the emergency room, the sounds muffled by thick walls and soft closed doors. 2 days had passed since Lily had brought Noah Bradley through those sliding glass doors, and against all expectations, she found herself still there, caught in the gravitational pull of the drama unfolding around the infant and his family. Grandma Maggie had been brought to the hospital that first evening, thanks to Miss Patel's arrangements. She sat now in a comfortable chair by the window of the family waiting area, her thin frame dwarfed by the plush upholstery, her oxygen tank beside her. The exertion of leaving their apartment had exhausted her, but she had insisted on coming when she heard what had happened. "You did a brave thing." "My lily flower," she had whispered when they were finally reunited, her gnarled fingers stroking Lily's hair. "I always knew you had your mama's heart." Lily leaned against her grandmother's knee now, watching as Robert Bradley paced the length of the hallway outside Noah's room, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice too low to make out the words. He had barely left the hospital since Noah was admitted, sleeping in the uncomfortable recliner by his son's crib, accepting the cups of coffee that nurses brought him with distracted gratitude. Victoria had made appearances, perfectly dressed and coiffed each time, bringing designer outfits for Noah that seemed inappropriate for a hospital stay, and speaking to the medical staff with a condescension that made them exchange glances behind her back. She never stayed long, always citing some charity event or social obligation that simply couldn't be rescheduled. The nanny, Sarah Wilson, had been questioned extensively by both the police and Child Protective Services. Lily had overheard snippets of her tearful explanations, how Victoria had abruptly dismissed her that morning, saying she wanted bonding time with Noah, how Sarah had been reluctant to leave, but couldn't risk losing her job, how Victoria had assured her that she would take Noah to his pediatrician appointment herself. Detective Rivera had been a constant presence as well, speaking with hospital staff, conferring with Ms. Patel, and conducting interviews in a small conference room down the hall. His face gave away nothing, but the increasing amount of time he spent on his phone suggested to Lily that whatever investigation he was conducting was expanding beyond the walls of the hospital. "Mr. Bradley looks like he's carrying the weight of the world," Grandma Maggie observed, as Robert ended his call and leaned against the wall. His eyes closed in what appeared to be pain or exhaustion. Lily nodded. "He's scared for Noah, and I think he's scared of something else too." Maggie studied her granddaughter's face. At 10 years old, Lily had already developed a perceptiveness that sometimes startled her. It was the gift, or perhaps the burden, of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. learning to read the subtle signs of adults' emotions as a matter of survival. What do you think he's scared of, honey? Lily hesitated, organizing her thoughts. I think he's scared that someone he trusted tried to hurt Noah, and I think he knows who it was, but he doesn't want to believe it. Before Maggie could respond, Ms. Patel appeared in the doorway, her professional smile firmly in place, but her eyes reflecting concern. Lily, Mrs. Morgan, I'm glad you're both still here. Mr. Bradley has asked to speak with you. Grandma Maggie straightened in her chair, her dignity asserting itself despite her frail health. Both of us. Yes, if you're feeling up to it. He's just received some news from the police that he wants to discuss with you. Lily felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. She had given her statement to Detective Rivera the previous day, recounting in detail how she had found Noah and what she had observed at the Bradley mansion. Had she said something wrong? Was she in trouble after all? Miss Patel seemed to read her thoughts. You're not in any trouble, Lily, quite the opposite. In fact, with Maggie leaning on her portable oxygen tank for support and Lily walking protectively close to her side, they followed Miss Patel to the small conference room where Robert Bradley waited. He stood when they entered, his face showing surprise at Maggie's frail appearance. Mrs. Morgan, thank you for coming. Please sit down. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Just Maggie is fine, Lily's grandmother replied with quiet dignity. And I'm quite all right, thank you. They settled around the conference table, Robert on one side, Lily and Maggie on the other, with Ms. Patel taking a seat at the end, her notepad open before her. Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. I've just received some disturbing information from Detective Rivera. The security footage from our home, which was initially reported as malfunctioning that day, wasn't malfunctioning at all. It was deliberately disabled. Lily felt a chill run through her body. Her suspicions about Noah being intentionally hidden were being confirmed. Furthermore, Robert continued, his voice strained, they found fingerprints on the car where Noah was found. Victoria's fingerprints. Maggie gasped softly, her hand reaching for Lily's under the table. I know this is difficult to hear, Ms. Patel interjected, her voice gentle but firm. But we need to understand exactly what happened that day to ensure Noah's safety going forward. Robert's face was a mask of controlled anguish. The detective believes that Victoria may have deliberately placed Noah in that car. The medical examiner has determined that he was in there for at least 4 hours before Lily found him. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled around them. 4 hours in a closed car, even on a relatively cool, rainy day in Seattle, could have been fatal for an infant. But why? Lily blurted out, unable to contain the question that burned in her mind. Why would she do that to her own baby? Robert's eyes met hers, and in them she saw a depth of pain that made her own chest ache in sympathy. Noah isn't Victoria's biological child, he said quietly. His mother, my first wife Caroline, died shortly after he was born from complications of childbirth. Victoria and I married 6 months ago. She's always seemed supportive, understanding about my grief, about the challenges of raising Noah without his mother. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound distress. But there have been signs looking back. Comments about starting fresh, about wanting her own children, about Noah being a constant reminder of Caroline. Miss Patel made a note, her face carefully neutral. Has Victoria been questioned about the fingerprints? She claims she checked on Noah in the car earlier that day, that she thought Sarah had taken him inside afterward. Robert's voice was hollow with disbelief. It doesn't explain the disabled security cameras, or why the car was hidden behind the garage under a tarp, or why she told Sarah she was taking Noah to the doctor herself, Lily added softly. Robert looked at her sharply. How do you know that? Lily flushed, realizing she had revealed her eavesdropping. I overheard Sarah talking to the detective yesterday. Rather than being angry, Robert seemed to deflate further. Yes, that's another inconsistency. There was no doctor's appointment scheduled for that day. Ms. Patel leaned forward, her voice taking on a more official tone. Mr. Bradley, I need to be clear about something. Given the circumstances, CPS will be opening a formal investigation. Noah cannot be released into a home environment where there's any risk to his safety. Panic flashed across Robert's face. You can't take my son away. He's all I have left of Caroline. That's not my intention, Ms. Patel assured him, but we need to establish a safety plan. Victoria cannot have unsupervised access to Noah until this investigation is complete. Robert nodded grimly. I understand. I've already spoken to my lawyer about a separation. I want her out of our home before Noah is discharged. He turned his attention to Maggie, his expression softening. Mrs. Morgan, Maggie, I asked you both here because I wanted to thank you properly for what Lily did. She saved Noah's life at considerable risk to herself. I understand from Ms. Patel that your situation is challenging. Maggie straightened her shoulders, pride evident in her posture despite her oxygen tubes and weathered appearance. We manage. I'm sure you do, Robert said respectfully, but I'd like to help. Not out of pity, but out of gratitude and a desire to make things right. To give back some of the good fortune that Lily brought to us. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She hadn't rescued Noah expecting any reward. The idea of accepting help from this wealthy stranger, no matter how genuine his gratitude seemed, felt awkward and somehow wrong. Sensing her discomfort, Maggie placed a gentle hand on her arm. Lily has always been independent, Mr. Bradley. She's had to be. But we would be foolish to refuse help that could make her life easier, especially when it's offered with such sincere appreciation. Robert smiled for the first time since they'd entered the room, a small, tired smile, but genuine. Please call me Robert, and I'm not talking about a one-time payment or some token gesture. I'm proposing something more substantial. He outlined his offer. Full medical coverage for Maggie's chronic pulmonary condition, enrollment for Lily at Lakeside School, one of Seattle's most prestigious private institutions, a comfortable apartment in a safer neighborhood, and a monthly stipend that would ensure they never had to worry about basic necessities again. It's the least I can do, he finished, looking directly at Lily. You've given me back my son. Let me give you back some of your childhood. Lily felt overwhelmed. The offer was beyond anything she could have imagined, a lifeline that would transform their precarious existence into one of security and opportunity. Yet a part of her hesitated, wondering if accepting would somehow change who she was, who they were as a family. Can I still visit Noah? She asked suddenly, surprising even herself with the question. Robert blinked, then smiled more fully. Of course, I think he'd like that. He seems to respond to your voice, you know. When you visited him yesterday, the nurses said his vitals improved. Maggie watched the exchange with thoughtful eyes. Lily has always had a way with little ones. Even as a small child herself, she could quiet a crying baby with just her presence. Miss Patel cleared her throat gently. This is a generous offer, Mr. Bradley. However, I want to make sure everyone understands that accepting help doesn't create any obligations beyond what's freely given. Lily's actions were heroic and she deserves support, but she's still a child herself. Absolutely, Robert agreed immediately. No strings attached. I just want to make their lives easier, to express my gratitude in a meaningful way. The conversation continued, details were discussed, and preliminary arrangements were made. Throughout it all, Lily remained somewhat detached, her mind drifting to the tiny baby in the hospital room down the hall. She had felt a connection to him from the moment she heard his faint cry, a pull that she couldn't explain, but couldn't deny either. Whatever happened next, she knew their lives were now intertwined in ways that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. As they were preparing to leave the conference room, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Raised voices, the sound of rapid footsteps, and then the door burst open to reveal Victoria Bradley, her perfect composure shattered, her eyes wild with a combination of rage and fear. "How dare you?" she hissed at Robert, seemingly oblivious to the others in the room. "You've frozen our accounts? You've changed the locks. Based on what? The word of a little gutter rat who was trespassing on our property." Her gaze fell on Lily, and the hatred in her eyes made the girl instinctively step closer to her grandmother. "Victoria," Robert's voice was ice cold, "you need to leave now, before you say something that makes your situation even worse than it already is." "My situation?" Victoria laughed, a high, brittle sound that contained no humor. "You have no idea what my situation is, Robert. You never have, playing the grieving widower, clutching Caroline's memory like some precious relic, never letting anyone else in. Not really." Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You think you know what happened that day? You have no idea. No idea at all." Detective Rivera appeared in the doorway behind her, his expression grim. "Mrs. Bradley, I need you to come with me now." Victoria whirled to face him, her designer purse swinging wildly. "On what grounds?" "New evidence has come to light regarding the events of Tuesday afternoon. We need to take your formal statement downtown." For a moment, it seemed Victoria might resist, might continue her tirade or even try to flee. But then, as quickly as the storm had arrived, it passed. Her features rearranged themselves into a mask of affronted dignity, and she straightened her silk blouse with manicured fingers that trembled slightly. "Fine, I have nothing to hide. But you'll be hearing from my attorney." She cast one last venomous glance at Lily before allowing Detective Rivera to escort her from the room. In the silence that followed her departure, Lily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked up at Robert, who stood frozen, his face ashen. "What new evidence?" he asked Miss Patel, his voice barely audible. The social worker shook her head. "I don't know. Detective Rivera doesn't share everything with CPS." But Lily had a sudden, chilling thought. "The cameras," she said. "You said the security cameras were disabled. But what if there were other cameras? Ones Victoria didn't know about?" Robert turned to her, his expression shifting from shock to dawning realization. "The nanny cam," he whispered. "Caroline installed it before Noah was born. It looks like a stuffed bear on the nursery shelf. Victoria never knew about it because I couldn't bear to go into the nursery for months after Caroline was gone. By the time I did, Noah was almost 6 months old, and the bear had become just another toy to him. I forgot it was even there until now." The implications hung in the air between them. If that hidden camera had captured footage from the day Noah disappeared, if it had recorded Victoria's actions and intentions, "I need to call my lawyer again," Robert said abruptly, pulling out his phone. "And Detective Rivera. If there's footage, they need to see it immediately." As he stepped out into the hallway to make his calls, Lily leaned against her grandmother, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of everything that had transpired. Maggie's arm came around her, thin but strong, a lifeline in the stormy sea of adult complexities. "It's going to be all right, my lily flower," she murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her granddaughter's head. "Sometimes the darkest clouds bring the most needed rain." Lily nodded against her grandmother's shoulder, hoping with all her heart that Maggie was right, that from this tangled web of deceit and danger, something good would emerge, not just for Noah and his father, but for all of them caught in the unexpected current of this extraordinary series of events. 1 week after Noah's rescue, Seattle's persistent rain had given way to an unusually clear autumn day. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the small but comfortable apartment that Robert had arranged for Lily and her grandmother in the Queen Anne neighborhood. The space was modest by wealthy standards, but felt like a palace compared to their previous home. Clean, safe, with reliable heat and working appliances. Most importantly, it was equipped with the medical necessities that Maggie needed. A hospital bed in the second bedroom, proper oxygen equipment, and a walk-in shower with safety rails. Lily stood at the kitchen counter, carefully arranging her grandmother's medications for the day. The home health nurse had shown her how to organize the pills in a weekly dispenser, but Lily had been managing Maggie's medications for years and had her own system. Some things were hard to change even when help was available. "You don't have to do that anymore." "You know," Maggie called from her recliner in the living room, where she sat bathed in sunlight, a novel open on her lap. "Nurse Jenkins would be happy to set them up when she comes." Lily smiled, the expression transforming her solemn face into something luminous. "I know, but I like doing it. It makes me feel useful." The doorbell rang, startling them both. They weren't expecting visitors, and even after a week in their new home, they were still adjusting to the security system, the doorman downstairs, and the general feeling of being protected rather than exposed. Lily peered through the peephole, then broke into a grin as she opened the door. Sarah Wilson, Noah's nanny, stood in the hallway, her practical ponytail replaced by loose waves that softened her worried face. She held a small gift bag and wore a tentative smile. "Hi, Lily, I hope it's okay that I stopped by. Mr. Bradley gave me your address. He thought you might like an update on Noah." "Of course, come in. This is my grandma, Maggie Morgan." Sarah greeted Maggie warmly, then settled on the sofa, her posture still carrying the tension of recent events. Noah's doing really well. He's home from the hospital now, completely recovered. The doctors say there won't be any lasting effects. Relief washed over Lily. She had visited Noah in the hospital every day until his discharge, watching his color improve and his strength return, but she hadn't seen him since he'd gone home 3 days ago. That's wonderful. Is he sleeping better now? Much better. And Mr. Bradley has hired a night nurse to help, which means I actually get to sleep too. Sarah's smile faded slightly. Everything's different now, of course. The house feels emptier but also lighter somehow without her there. Her meaning was clear. Victoria was gone, though the full legal consequences of her actions were still unfolding. The nanny cam footage, recovered by Detective Rivera, had proven damning. It showed Victoria entering the nursery, methodically packing a bag with Noah's things, then carrying the sleeping baby, not toward the front door for a supposed doctor's appointment, but toward the back of the house, toward the garage. Has she been charged? Maggie asked, her voice gentle but direct. Sarah nodded, her eyes downcast. Attempted murder and child endangerment. Her lawyer is trying to get the charges reduced, claiming temporary insanity or postpartum depression, which is ridiculous since she's not even Noah's biological mother. But Mr. Bradley thinks they'll still get a conviction, especially with the footage, and she hesitated, glancing at Lily. And my testimony, Lily finished for her. She had already given a formal statement to the district attorney, describing in detail how and where she had found Noah. She would likely have to testify if the case went to trial. Yes, Sarah confirmed. Your testimony is crucial. But that's not why I came. She handed the gift bag to Lily. This is from Mr. Bradley. He wanted me to give it to you personally. Curious, Lily opened the bag and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature shield. He said it's to remind you that you're Noah's protector, his shield when he needed one most, Sarah explained, her voice thick with emotion. And there's something else. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope, handing it to Maggie. Mr. Bradley asked me to deliver this as well. He said it's not charity. It's an investment in Lily's future, and a way to ensure you get the medical care you need. Maggie opened the envelope with trembling fingers and gasped softly at what she found inside. Legal documents establishing a trust fund for Lily's education and a separate account for Maggie's ongoing medical expenses. This is too much, Maggie protested weakly. Though her eyes shone with unshed tears of relief, Sarah shook her head firmly. It's not nearly enough, according to him. Mr. Bradley says he owes Lily everything, and she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I think having you both in their lives helps fill some of the emptiness for both him and Noah. Lily turned the bracelet over in her hands, touched by the symbolism but uncomfortable with the idea of being rewarded for what had been pure instinct. I didn't do it for any of this. We know that, Sarah assured her. That's precisely why Mr. Bradley wants to help. Because you acted selflessly, without expectation of reward. Those kinds of actions are rare, Lily. They deserve to be honored. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Lily's upcoming enrollment at her new school, the arrangements being made for Maggie's medical care, the improvements already visible in her condition with proper treatment. Sarah shared stories about Noah's developing personality, his newfound fascination with his own reflection, his infectious belly laugh. As Sarah prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. There's one more thing. Mr. Bradley would like to invite you both to dinner at his home this weekend, a small private celebration of Noah's recovery and, well, a chance to discuss some ideas he has about the future. After Sarah left, Lily and Maggie sat in contemplative silence, each processing the unexpected turns their lives had taken in the span of just over a week. What do you think he wants to discuss? Lily finally asked, still turning the bracelet over in her hands. Maggie considered the question, her wise eyes thoughtful. I'm not sure, honey, but whatever it is, we'll hear him out. That man owes you his son's life, and he knows it. There's a bond there that can't be broken or bought, no matter how many bracelets or trust funds he offers. Lily nodded, her thoughts drifting to the baby, who had somehow changed the trajectory of her life with his feeble cry. I miss him, she admitted softly, surprising herself with the depth of emotion behind the simple statement. Maggie smiled knowingly. Then we should definitely accept that dinner invitation. The Bradley mansion looked different in the fading light of evening than it had on that rainy afternoon when Lily had first slipped through the fence. The imposing gate stood open for them as Robert's driver delivered them to the circular driveway, and the house itself seemed warmer somehow, lights glowing in windows that had previously appeared dark and forbidding. Robert greeted them at the door himself, looking more rested than he had during the hospital vigil, though fine lines of strain still mapped his face. "Maggie, Lily, thank you for coming. Please come in." The interior of the house was elegant but lived in, with signs of a baby's presence everywhere. A swing in the corner of the living room, soft blocks scattered on an expensive rug, a half-empty bottle on a side table. It wasn't the sterile showcase Lily had imagined, but a home, albeit an extraordinarily luxurious one. "Noah's just finishing his dinner with Sarah," Robert explained, leading them through to a spacious kitchen where modern appliances gleamed alongside homey touches, children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator, a row of cookbooks with well-worn spines, potted herbs on the windowsill. Lily noticed the artwork with surprise. "Are those Noah's drawings? Isn't he too little?" Robert laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "No, those are from the children at the hospital's pediatric oncology ward. Caroline volunteered there before she got pregnant. I've kept them up." It felt important to maintain that connection to her compassion, her capacity for joy even in difficult circumstances. The mention of his late wife brought a momentary shadow to his eyes, but it passed quickly as Sarah appeared in the doorway with Noah in her arms. "Look who's all clean and ready to see his visitors," she announced cheerfully. Noah had changed dramatically in the week since Lily had last seen him. His cheeks had filled out, his complexion was rosy with health, and his blue eyes were alert and curious. When he spotted Lily, he let out a squeal of delight and reached for her with pudgy hands. "May I?" she asked Robert, her arms already extending toward the baby. "Of course." Noah came to her willingly, settling against her chest with a contented sigh that made the adults exchange meaningful glances over her head. Lily inhaled his clean baby scent, marveling at the difference between this thriving infant and the limp, dehydrated one she had carried through Seattle's streets. "He remembers you," Robert said softly. Lily wasn't sure if that was true or just wishful thinking, but she liked the idea that their connection went beyond that one desperate day. Dinner was served in a comfortable breakfast nook rather than the formal dining room, with Noah settled in a high chair between Robert and Lily. The meal was delicious but unpretentious: roast chicken, fresh vegetables, warm bread, and the conversation flowed easily, centered mostly around Noah's progress, Lily's preparations for her new school, and Maggie's improving health. It wasn't until they moved to the living room for dessert, with Noah dozing in Robert's arms, that the tone shifted to something more serious. "I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here tonight. Beyond the obvious desire to express my gratitude again," Robert began, his voice low to avoid disturbing the baby. Maggie nodded encouragingly, her posture relaxed but attentive in the comfortable armchair where she sat. "The truth is, Noah and I are at a crossroads. Victoria's actions have left us in a complicated situation. I'm a single father with a demanding career. Sarah is wonderful, but she has her own life, her own family. And Noah needs more than just hired help, as qualified and caring as that help might be." He looked down at his sleeping son, his expression a complex mixture of love and concern. "He needs stability, consistency, people in his life who genuinely care about him, not because they're paid to, but because they choose to." Lily felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest, though she wasn't entirely sure what Robert was leading up to. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately," he continued, "about how it's not always defined by blood or legal ties. Sometimes it's defined by actions, by choices, by the connections we forge in moments of crisis." He lifted his gaze to meet Lily's, then Maggie's. "I'd like to propose an arrangement. Not adoption. I know that would be inappropriate given that you have each other, but a kind of extended family relationship. I'd like you both to become a permanent part of Noah's life. And mine." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "What exactly are you suggesting, Robert?" He shifted Noah gently to a more comfortable position. I'm suggesting that you both move in here. Not immediately, of course. We'd need to take time to adjust, to get to know each other better. But eventually, the East Wing has a separate entrance, a full kitchen, everything you would need for independence. Maggie, you'd have round-the-clock medical care available. Lily, you'd still attend Lakeside, but you'd be here for Noah after school on weekends. You'd be a big sister of sorts. The proposal hung in the air between them, unexpected and overwhelming in its implications. That's so significant change from our current arrangement, Maggie said carefully. Robert nodded, acknowledging the understatement. It is, and I don't expect an answer tonight. I want you to think about it, discuss it between yourselves. Consider all the angles. His eyes held a vulnerability that seemed out of place in a man of his wealth and position. I know it might seem strange, even presumptuous, but watching Lily with Noah, seeing how they connect, it feels right. And after everything that's happened, I've learned to trust those instincts more than the conventional wisdom about what a family should look like. Lily looked down at her hands, trying to process the emotions swirling inside her. The idea of being a permanent part of Noah's life filled her with unexpected joy. She had grown attached to the baby in ways she hadn't anticipated, feeling a responsibility toward him that went beyond the circumstances of their meeting. And yet the prospect of moving into this mansion, of becoming entangled in Robert's world of wealth and privilege, frightened her too. Would I still take care of Grandma? She asked, the question revealing her most immediate concern. Robert's expression softened. You'd never be separated from your grandmother, Lily. And while there would be medical professionals to handle the more complex aspects of her care, you could still be as involved as you wanted to be. The difference is, you wouldn't have to bear that responsibility alone anymore. Maggie reached over to take Lily's hand. What my granddaughter is really asking is whether she'd still have a purpose, a role beyond being a big sister to Noah. Lily has defined herself by her responsibilities for so long that the idea of having them taken away, even with the best of intentions, is threatening to her sense of who she is. Robert's gaze shifted between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. I see, and that's a valid concern. But Lily, helping with Noah wouldn't be the only purpose you'd have here. You'd be free to pursue your own interests, to discover who you are beyond the roles necessity has forced upon you. That's part of what I'm offering, the chance for both of you to live, not just survive. Noah stirred in his sleep, making a small sound of discontent. Without thinking, Lily reached over to stroke his cheek, and he settled immediately, his tiny fingers curling around one of hers in unconscious trust. The gesture wasn't lost on Robert or Maggie, who exchanged a look over the children's heads, one that acknowledged the bond that had formed, unexpected but undeniable. Think about it, Robert urged gently. There's no rush. We can start with more visits, more time together, and see how it feels for all of us. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to leave, Robert handed Noah to Lily for a final goodbye. The baby's eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on her face with what seemed like recognition, before closing again in peaceful sleep. He knows you, Robert said quietly, as she gently transferred Noah back to his arms. On some level, he remembers that you were there when he needed someone most. That connection isn't something I want to lose, for his sake or for yours. In the car on the way back to their apartment, Lily and Maggie sat in contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts about the future that had just been laid before them. A future so different from anything they could have imagined a mere 2 weeks earlier. What do you think, Grandma? Lily finally asked as the city light streamed past the window. Maggie took her time answering, her voice thoughtful when she finally spoke. I think that life sometimes takes us on unexpected journeys, and I think that when doors open before us, we should at least peek inside before deciding whether to walk through. Lily nodded, her fingers unconsciously touching the silver bracelet on her wrist. She thought about Noah's small hand gripping her finger, about the weight of him in her arms, about the connection she felt, one that transcended explanation. I'd like to keep visiting him, she said softly, to see how it feels. Maggie smiled, wrapping an arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. Then that's what we'll do, my lily flower, one step at a time. Outside, Seattle's lights shimmered against the night sky, stars peeking through breaks in the clouds. Somewhere in that glittering landscape was a baby sleeping peacefully, because a girl had followed her instincts on a rainy afternoon. And in that simple act of courage, the foundations of an unconventional family had begun to form. One built not on blood or legal documents, but on the purest kind of love, the kind that acts without calculation, that gives without expectation, that protects without reservation. It was, Lily thought as she leaned against her grandmother's familiar warmth, a new kind of beginning for all of them. 3 months had passed since Robert's dinner invitation and his unexpected proposal. Winter had settled over Seattle, transforming the city with its quiet blanket of occasional snow and perpetual gray skies. Christmas decorations glittered in windows and storefronts, their cheerful lights a defiance against the early darkness. Lily stood at the entrance to Lakeside School, watching as other students streamed past her toward waiting cars and buses. Her new uniform still felt strange, the pleated skirt and blazer a far cry from the second-hand clothes she had worn for most of her life. But other things were beginning to feel less foreign. The weight of quality textbooks in her backpack, the sound of her name called with friendly recognition, the sense of belonging to a place that valued learning above all else. "Lily, wait up!" She turned to see Emma Chen, the daughter of the pediatrician who had treated Noah, jogging toward her. Emma had been assigned as Lily's buddy when she started at Lakeside, but their relationship had quickly evolved into a genuine friendship. "Are you coming to study group tonight?" Emma asked, falling into step beside her. Lily shook her head. "Can't, it's Tuesday." Emma nodded in understanding. "Noah Day. Tell the little munchkin I said hi." "I will." Lily smiled, warmed by her friend's acceptance of the unusual arrangement that had developed over the past months. Twice a week, Lily visited the Bradley mansion after school, spending the afternoon and evening with Noah, while Robert caught up on work or attended meetings he couldn't reschedule. It wasn't babysitting exactly, Sarah was always there too, but rather a deliberate building of bonds, a gradual integration of lives that had once been separate but were now increasingly interconnected. Robert's driver, Thomas, waited at the curb in the now familiar black SUV. He greeted Lily with a warm smile as he opened the door for her. "Good day at school, Miss Lily?" "Taught pretty good. I got an A on my history paper." "Excellent. Mr. Bradley will be pleased to hear that." The drive to Madison Park was familiar now, the route no longer intimidating but almost comforting in its routine. Thomas chatted about the weather, about the holiday lights going up around the city, about his daughter, who was just a year older than Lily and apparently just as fond of science class. The Bradley mansion looked different now too, Lily reflected as they approached. Not physically. It was still the imposing structure of brick and stone that had first caught her attention on that fateful rainy day. But it felt different to her. What had once seemed forbidding now felt welcoming. The gates opening automatically to admit the car, the front door lightly unlocked in anticipation of her arrival. Sure enough, Sarah met her in the foyer, Noah balanced on her hip. The baby, though at 1 year old he was rapidly leaving infancy behind, let out a squeal of delight when he saw Lily and immediately lunged toward her, nearly toppling out of Sarah's arms in his enthusiasm. "Someone's excited to see his favorite visitor," Sarah laughed, transferring the wriggling toddler to Lily's waiting arms. Noah immediately buried his face in Lily's neck, his small body vibrating with happiness. His vocabulary was still limited, but he had recently mastered Lily, his version of her name, which he now repeated against her skin like a joyful mantra. "Hey, buddy," Lily murmured, breathing in his familiar scent of baby shampoo and the faint cinnamon of the teething biscuits he loved. "I missed you too." The afternoon unfolded in its usual pleasant rhythm. Noah showed off his newest skills, walking confidently from furniture piece to furniture piece, stacking blocks with surprising dexterity, identifying body parts when asked. Lily read to him from the picture books that now filled a dedicated shelf in the living room, his attention span growing longer with each visit. Sarah moved quietly around them, preparing Noah's dinner, occasionally joining in their play, but mostly giving them space to strengthen the unique bond that had formed between them. It was a comfortable arrangement that had evolved naturally over the weeks of visits. Robert arrived home earlier than usual, loosening his tie as he entered the living room where Lily and Noah were engrossed in a game of peekaboo. "Well, this is a nice sight to come home to," he said, his tired face lighting up at his son's peals of laughter. Noah immediately abandoned the game and toddled toward his father with outstretched arms. "Dada, up!" Robert swung him high into the air, eliciting more giggles before settling him against his shoulder in a practiced motion. "How was your day, buddy? Were you good for Sarah and Lily?" "He's always good," Lily said loyally, though they all knew Noah's emerging independence was sometimes expressed through determined resistance to naps and a newfound pickiness about food. Robert smiled knowingly. "Of course he is. Perfect." "Angel, right, Sarah?" The nanny rolled her eyes good-naturedly. If by angel you mean threw his sippy cup across the kitchen 3 times during lunch, then absolutely. "That's my boy," Robert chuckled, clearly unbothered by this minor mischief. His gaze shifted to Lily. "And how was school?" Thomas mentioned something about a history paper. Lily ducked her head, still unused to this regular interest in her academic achievements. "It was good, I got an A." "That's fantastic, Lily. What was the topic?" "The impact of the Klondike Gold Rush on Seattle's development." Robert's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "That sounds fascinating. I'd love to read it sometime if you wouldn't mind sharing." Before Lily could respond, Sarah intervened with the practiced timing of someone accustomed to managing household schedules. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Noah's already eaten, but he can sit with us for a while before bedtime." Robert nodded gratefully. "Perfect, I'll just go change quickly. Lily, would you mind keeping an eye on the little explorer here? He's been testing every door handle in the house lately." "No problem," Lily agreed, holding out her hands to Noah, who willingly transferred from his father's arms back to hers. As Robert headed upstairs and Sarah returned to the kitchen, Lily carried Noah to the window overlooking the backyard. Snow had begun to fall again, large flakes drifting lazily in the pool of light cast by the exterior lamps. "Look, Noah," she said softly, pointing to the mesmerizing descent of snowflakes. "Isn't it pretty?" Noah pressed his small hand against the cold glass, his blue eyes wide with wonder. "Pity," he echoed, attempting to repeat her word. Lily smiled, feeling a surge of something protective and fierce. In these quiet moments, the strangeness of their situation often struck her anew. How a chance encounter had woven their lives together so completely. How this child who shared no blood with her had nonetheless become as dear to her as if he were her own brother. Dinner was a relaxed affair, the 3 adults conversing easily while Noah played with a set of plastic keys in his high chair, occasionally joining the conversation with enthusiastic but incomprehensible contributions. Robert shared amusing anecdotes from his day at the office, Sarah updated them on Noah's latest developmental milestones, and Lily recounted highlights from school, growing more animated as she described a science experiment her class had conducted. It was, Lily realized, startlingly close to what a normal family dinner might feel like. Comfortable, warm, filled with the small details of shared lives. After Noah was put to bed, with Lily assisting in the nighttime routine that now included her reading a final story before Robert took over for goodnight kisses, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Robert invited Lily to join him in his study, a room she had rarely entered during her previous visits. The space was less formal than she had expected, bookshelves lined with well-read volumes, comfortable leather chairs arranged near a fireplace, where flames crackled cheerfully, framed photographs on the desk showing Noah at various stages of his short life, and Lily noticed with surprise a candid shot of herself with Noah taken during a recent visit to the park. "Please sit down," Robert gestured to one of the chairs by the fire. "I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Lily perched on the edge of the seat, suddenly nervous. These more serious conversations usually included her grandmother. "Is everything okay?" Robert settled into the chair opposite hers, his expression thoughtful but not troubled. "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I've just been thinking about the arrangement I proposed a few months ago, about you and Maggie possibly moving in here." Lily's heart beat a little faster. She and her grandmother had discussed the idea extensively over the intervening months, weighing the benefits against their concerns, but had yet to give Robert a definitive answer. "I know it's a big decision," Robert continued, "and I've been careful not to pressure you. But I wanted to let you know that I've had some renovations done to the East Wing, based on some of the concerns Maggie mentioned during her last visit." The renovations had been mentioned in passing, but Lily hadn't realized they were specifically addressing her grandmother's concerns about accessibility and privacy. The entire wing is now wheelchair accessible, though I pray Maggie won't need that accommodation anytime soon. There's a private entrance, as I mentioned before, a fully equipped kitchen, and the medical suite has been updated with all the equipment her doctors recommended. He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. I want you both to know that I'm serious about making this work, about creating a space where you can maintain your independence while still being part of our family. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Family. It was what they had been gradually becoming over these months of visits, shared meals, and Noah's gleeful recognition of Lily's arrival, but hearing it stated so explicitly sent a flutter of both longing and anxiety through Lily's chest. I don't want to replace your parents, Lily, Robert said softly, seeming to read her thoughts. I know Maggie has been both mother and father to you since you lost them. I'm not trying to usurp her role or erase your history. I'm simply offering to expand your family circle, to add rather than replace. Lily nodded, appreciating his understanding of her complex feelings. Grandma and I have talked about it a lot, she admitted. She thinks it would be good for all of us. She worries about being a burden on me, even though she's never been that. Maggie could never be a burden, Robert agreed. She's an extraordinary woman who has raised an equally extraordinary granddaughter under incredibly difficult circumstances. My offer is as much for her benefit as for yours and Noah's. She deserves to spend her remaining years in comfort, with the best medical care available, watching you thrive rather than struggle. The mention of her grandmother's limited time sent a pang through Lily's heart. Maggie's condition had stabilized with proper treatment, but the doctors had been clear that her lungs would never fully recover from years of inadequate care. There's something else, Robert added, his tone gentler still. Victoria's trial is scheduled for next month. The prosecutor believes it will be straightforward given the evidence, but you may need to testify briefly. I want you to know that, whatever happens with her legal proceedings, you and Maggie will always have a place here. That's not contingent on anything else. Lily had been dreading the trial, not because she feared facing Victoria again, but because she hated the idea of reliving that day, of seeing Noah's condition described in clinical terms by medical experts, of having her impulsive act of rescue dissected by attorneys and judges. Will Noah be okay? She asked, her primary concern as always for the child who had become so central to her life. Will he ever have to know what she tried to do? Robert's face softened with affection and gratitude. Someday, when he's old enough to understand, I'll tell him the truth. And I'll tell him that his life was saved by the bravest, most compassionate person I've ever known. A girl who risked everything to help a baby she didn't even know. Lily flushed, still uncomfortable with being cast as a hero for what had felt like the only possible course of action. Anyone would have done the same. No, Lily, they wouldn't have. Most people would have called 911 and waited for someone else to take responsibility. Most wouldn't have carried a sick baby across Seattle in the rain, barefoot. What you did was extraordinary, and I'll make sure Noah grows up knowing that. He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a folder, sliding it across to her. This is something else I've been working on. It's not finalized yet. It would require Maggie's approval and some legal proceedings, but I wanted you to see it, to understand how serious I am about this arrangement. Lily opened the folder with curious fingers and found legal documents inside. Her eyes widened as she scanned the first page, struggling to comprehend the formal language, but understanding enough to recognize the general intent. This is guardianship, she asked, looking up at Robert in confusion. He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Shared guardianship, to be precise. It would give me certain legal rights regarding your care and education if something were to happen to Maggie, while also giving her certain rights regarding Noah if something were to happen to me. It's a legal recognition of the bonds we've been forming, a safety net for all of us. The concept was overwhelming. Lily had never considered what might happen if Grandma Maggie were no longer able to care for her. The unspoken fear had always been foster care, the system that had separated her friend Marcus from everyone he knew. It's just a proposal, Robert hastened to add, seeing her stunned expression. Something for you and Maggie to think about. There's no pressure to decide now or even soon. I just want you to know that my commitment to your place in our lives is absolute." Lily carefully closed the folder, her mind whirling with the implications. It was so much more than she had expected when she'd slipped through the fence of this very property 3 months ago, following the sound of a baby's cry. So much more than she could have imagined when she was running barefoot through Seattle's rain-slicked streets with Noah clutched to her chest. "I'll talk to Grandma about it," she promised, her voice steady despite the emotion building in her throat. "About all of it. Moving in, the guardianship, everything." Robert nodded, respecting her need to process the information. "That's all I ask, and Lily, whatever you both decide, nothing changes about your relationship with Noah. You'll always be his Lily, the girl who saved him, who reads him stories and makes him laugh like no one else can." As Thomas drove her home later that evening, Lily watched the snow-dusted city pass outside the window, the holiday lights blurring into streaks of color through the glass. Her thoughts were a tangle of possibilities, fears, and hopes, not just for herself and Grandma Maggie, but for Noah and Robert too. The idea of family had always been a simple one for her. Grandma Maggie, the memory of parents lost too soon, and the fierce bond between a girl and the woman who had raised her against all odds. Now that definition was expanding, reshaping itself to include a baby with wispy blonde hair and his father with kind eyes and a generous heart. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. When they reached her apartment building, Thomas insisted on escorting her inside, despite her assurances that she would be fine. It was one of the many ways her life had changed, this constant, gentle protection from adults who had taken it upon themselves to look after her welfare. Grandma Maggie was waiting up, sitting in her favorite chair by the window that overlooked the twinkling cityscape. She looked up from her book as Lily entered, her wise eyes immediately noting her granddaughter's thoughtful expression. "Good evening, my Lily flower. How was your visit with Noah?" Lily settled on the ottoman at her grandmother's feet, a position they had shared for countless conversations over the years. "It was good. He can say my name now, well, Lily, but close enough." Maggie smiled, setting her book aside. "That's wonderful. And how was your talk with Robert? I can see from your face that it was significant." Sometimes Lily forgot how well her grandmother knew her, how adept she was at reading the subtle signs of her moods and thoughts. "He showed me the renovations he's doing to the East Wing, for us, and he gave me this to look at." She handed over the folder with the guardianship documents. Maggie put on her reading glasses and examined the papers carefully, her expression revealing nothing as she turned the pages. "I see," she said finally, closing the folder and removing her glasses. "And how do you feel about this, Lily? Not just the guardianship, but all of it. The possibility of making their home ours as well." Lily took a moment to organize her thoughts, knowing her grandmother deserved her most honest answer. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of Robert or Noah, but of how much things would change. Ev losing who we are, who I am." Maggie nodded encouragingly, waiting for her to continue. "But I'm also happy when I'm with Noah. And I like the way Robert treats us, not like charity cases, but like people he genuinely cares about. And I worry about you, Grandma. About your health, about what would happen to me if—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Maggie understood. Her gnarled hand reached out to stroke Lily's hair, a gesture of comfort that had remained constant throughout all the changes in their lives. "My sweet girl, you've been carrying the weight of such grown-up worries for so long. Perhaps it's time to share that burden, to allow yourself to be part of something larger than just you and me." Lily looked up, surprised by her grandmother's words. "You think we should accept? Move in with them?" Maggie's smile was gentle but resolute. "I think we should take the next step in what has already begun. This isn't about replacing what we have, Lily. It's about expanding it, about giving you the chance to be not just a caretaker, but a sister, a student, a young girl with dreams beyond survival." She tapped the folder with one finger. "As for this, it's a sensible precaution, not an expectation of disaster. Robert is being thoughtful about the future, ensuring that none of us would be left adrift if circumstances were to change." Lily leaned her head against her grandmother's knee, drawing comfort from the familiar contact. "When did you get so wise about all this?" Maggie chuckled, the sound warm in the quiet room. "Oh, I've had my doubts and fears too. But watching you with Noah, seeing how naturally you've become part of their lives and they part of ours, it seems like the path forward has been revealing itself all along, if we're brave enough to follow it." Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the city into a glittering wonderland of possibilities. Inside, wrapped in the warmth of her grandmother's understanding, Lily felt the first stirrings of certainty about the future that was unfolding. Before them, a future that had begun with one small act of courage on a rainy Seattle afternoon and was now blossoming into something neither of them could have imagined, but both could embrace. The King County Courthouse stood imposing against the winter sky, its gray stone facade matching the clouds that threatened more snow. Lily sat rigidly in the back seat of Robert's car, her hands clutched tightly in her lap, her school uniform replaced by a simple blue dress that Grandma Maggie had helped her choose for this day. The first day of Victoria Bradley's trial. "You don't have to do this," Robert said quietly from beside her, his own tension evident in the tight line of his jaw. "The prosecution has the nanny cam footage, the medical reports, Sarah's testimony. They don't strictly need yours." Lily met his gaze steadily, drawing on a well of determination that had sustained her through years of hardship. "I want to. For Noah." In the 4 months since she had found the baby abandoned in that car, Lily had replayed the events of that day countless times in her mind. The sound of his faint cry, the sight of his tiny body slumped in exhaustion, the feel of his burning skin against her rain-chilled hands. Those memories didn't haunt her. They strengthened her resolve that justice must be served. Robert nodded, understanding that her mind was made up. "Maggie's already inside with Sarah. Thomas will stay with you until I can join you. I need to speak with the prosecutor before we begin." As they approached the courthouse steps, a flurry of activity erupted around them. Journalists with cameras and microphones surged forward, held back by uniformed officers who cleared a path for Robert and Lily. "Mr. Bradley, is it true that your son would have died if not for the quick actions of this young girl?" "Mr. Bradley, will you be seeking the maximum penalty for your wife? Miss, can you tell us how you found the baby?" Robert's arm came around Lily's shoulders, shielding her from the barrage of questions as Thomas flanked her other side. "No comments at this time," Robert stated firmly, guiding Lily through the gauntlet of media with practiced efficiency. Inside, the marble halls echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Lily felt small and exposed, despite Robert's protective presence. This was so far removed from her life just months ago, before Noah, before the rescue, before the gradual intertwining of her fate with the Bradleys. They found Grandma Maggie waiting on a bench outside the courtroom, Sarah beside her. Both women stood as Robert and Lily approached. "There you are," Maggie said, embracing her granddaughter with thin but strong arms. "How are you feeling, my Lily flower?" "I'm okay," Lily answered, drawing strength from her grandmother's familiar presence. "A little nervous." Sarah gave her an encouraging smile. "You'll do fine. Just tell the truth, exactly as you remember it." The courthouse corridor filled with more people, attorneys in sharp suits, court personnel, curious onlookers, drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. Robert excused himself to confer with the prosecutor, a serious woman with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes, who nodded respectfully toward Lily. "That's District Attorney Hernandez," Sarah explained. "She's tough but fair. She's been building this case meticulously." Lily nodded, watching the interaction between Robert and the prosecutor with interest. She had learned a great deal about the legal system in the weeks leading up to the trial, with Robert patiently explaining the process and what to expect when she testified. The courtroom doors opened and people began filing inside. A uniformed officer approached their small group. "Miss Morgan, the DA would like you to wait in a separate room until you're called to testify. Family members are permitted to accompany you." Maggie squeezed Lily's hand. "I'll be right beside you, honey." Thomas promised to save them seats in the courtroom for when Lily's testimony was complete, and Sarah gave her a quick hug before they were escorted to a small waiting room down the hall. The room was plain, but not uncomfortable, with a water dispenser in one corner and a stack of outdated magazines on a side table. Lily paced nervously while Maggie watched with patient understanding. "Do you want to go over your testimony again?" her grandmother offered. Lily shook her head. "I've been over it so many times with Robert and Ms. Hernandez. I just want to get it over with." "It will be over soon," Maggie assured her. "And then we can put this behind us and focus on moving forward, on our new beginning." The new beginning Maggie referred to was their upcoming move to the Bradley mansion, scheduled for the following month after extensive renovations to the East Wing had been completed. After weeks of careful consideration, they had accepted Robert's offer, drawn not just by the practical benefits of the arrangement, but by the genuine bonds that had formed between them all. A light tap on the door interrupted their conversation. A young assistant from the prosecutor's office peered in. "They're ready for you, Miss Morgan. Your grandmother can wait in the courtroom now." With a final squeeze of her hand and a whispered, "You'll be fine," Maggie left to join the others. Lily took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and followed the assistant toward the courtroom, her heartbeat quickening with each step. The courtroom fell silent as she entered, dozens of eyes tracking her progress to the witness stand. Lily kept her gaze focused ahead, avoiding looking at the defense table where Victoria Bradley sat beside her attorney. But in her peripheral vision, she caught a glimpse of the woman's perfectly coiffed blonde hair and rigid posture, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather outside. After being sworn in, Lily settled into the witness chair, finally allowing herself to look around the courtroom. She found Robert immediately, his encouraging nod steadying her. Beside him sat Grandma Maggie and Sarah, with Thomas just behind them. Their presence formed an island of support in the sea of unfamiliar faces. District Attorney Hernandez approached the witness stand, her manner professional but gentle. "Miss Morgan, could you please tell the court in your own words, what happened on the afternoon of October 15th? Lily took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that day. How she had been walking in the Madison Park neighborhood, heard a baby's cry, and discovered Noah locked in the car behind the garage. Her voice grew stronger as she described prying open the unlocked back door, the condition she found the baby in, and her decision to take him directly to the hospital rather than seeking help at the main house. And why did you make that decision, Miss Morgan?" Ms. Hernandez asked. Lily hesitated, aware that her answer might sound presumptuous. The car was hidden on purpose. It was covered with a tarp, parked behind the garage where it couldn't be seen from the house or the street. Someone had put him there deliberately, and I was afraid they might still be in the house. "Objection, speculation," Victoria's attorney called out. "Sustained," the judge responded. "The jury will disregard the witness's assumption about intent." Ms. Hernandez nodded, unperturbed. "Let's focus on what you observed, Lily. What was Noah's condition when you found him?" "He was very hot to the touch. His lips were dry and cracked. His breathing was shallow, and his crying was so weak you could barely hear it unless you were right there. He wasn't moving much, just lying there like he didn't have the energy to do anything else." "And what did you do then?" "I picked him up and ran to Harborview Medical Center. It was about 20 blocks away, but it was the closest hospital I knew of." "You ran 20 blocks carrying a baby you didn't know? Why didn't you call 911? Lily's answer was simple. "I don't have a cell phone, and there wasn't time to find someone else to call." "He looked really sick, like he might—" She trailed off, unwilling to speak the word that had been so carefully avoided throughout the proceedings. "In your opinion, Miss Morgan, was Noah in immediate danger when you found him?" "Objection!" Victoria's attorney stood again. "The witness is not qualified to make medical assessments." "Your Honor, Miss Morgan was the first person to find Noah Bradley. Her perception of his condition is relevant to establishing the severity of the situation," Ms. Hernandez countered. The judge considered briefly. "I'll allow it. The witness may answer." Lily looked directly at the jury, her voice steady. "Yes, he was in danger. I could feel it. That's why I ran the whole way without stopping, even though my feet hurt and I could barely breathe by the end." Ms. Hernandez nodded, her expression solemn. "Thank you, Lily. No further questions, Your Honor." As the district attorney returned to her seat, Victoria's defense attorney rose and approached the witness stand. He was a tall man with carefully styled hair and an expensive suit that reminded Lily of the ones Robert wore to important meetings. "Miss Morgan, my name is James Whitfield. I represent Mrs. Victoria Bradley. I just have a few questions for you." Lily nodded, suddenly more nervous. Robert had warned her that the defense attorney would try to discredit her testimony or find inconsistencies, but knowing that didn't make it any easier to face. Miss Morgan, what were you doing in the Madison Park neighborhood that day? That's quite far from the Rainier Valley where you lived at the time, isn't it? The question carried an insinuation that Lily immediately recognized. He was suggesting she had no legitimate reason to be in that wealthy area. I was walking, she answered simply. Sometimes I walk a long way. It helps me think. And you just happened to walk by the Bradley residence, one of the largest estates in the neighborhood, with extensive security measures. I didn't know whose house it was. I just heard a baby crying. Mr. Whitfield paced slowly before the witness stand. You testified that you squeezed through a gap in the fence to enter the property. Were you aware that you were trespassing on private property? Objection, Ms. Hernandez called out. Relevance. Miss Morgan's actions were clearly motivated by concern for a child in distress. I'm establishing the witness's state of mind and credibility. Your Honor, Mr. Whitfield responded smoothly. I'll allow it. But tread carefully, Counselor, the judge warned. Miss Morgan, you may answer the question. Lily looked the defense attorney directly in the eye, refusing to be intimidated. Yes, I knew it was private property, but I also knew there was a baby who needed help. That seemed more important. A murmur of approval rippled through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Mr. Whitfield changed tactics. Miss Morgan, you've developed quite a close relationship with the Bradley family since this incident, haven't you? Lily's stomach tightened. Yes, I visit Noah regularly. In fact, I understand that you and your grandmother are planning to move into the Bradley residence. Is that correct? Objection. Relevance, Ms. Hernandez interjected again. I'm establishing potential bias, Your Honor, Mr. Whitfield argued. The judge considered briefly. I'll allow it, but again, tread carefully. Lily kept her voice steady. Yes, we're moving into a separate wing of the house next month. So it would be fair to say that you've benefited considerably from your involvement with the Bradley family. New home, private school education, medical care for your grandmother. Quite a change in circumstances for you, wouldn't you agree? The insinuation was clear, that she had somehow engineered the situation for personal gain, or that her testimony might be influenced by the benefits she had received. Indignation flared in Lily's chest. I found a baby who needed help, and I helped him. Everything else happened afterward. She met Mr. Whitfield's gaze unflinchingly. I didn't know he was rich. I didn't know who his father was. I just knew he needed help right away. Mr. Whitfield's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture suggested he recognized he wasn't making headway with this line of questioning. No further questions, Your Honor, he said, returning to the defense table where Victoria sat. Her expression carefully composed, but her eyes burning with resentment as they followed Lily's exit from the witness stand. Released from testimony, Lily joined her grandmother, Robert, and Sarah in the spectator section. Robert squeezed her shoulder gently as she slid into the seat beside him. You did wonderfully, he whispered. The trial continued with testimony from medical experts who detailed Noah's condition upon arrival at the hospital. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, and early signs of organ stress that could have progressed to failure if he had remained in the car much longer. Sarah took the stand next, recounting how Victoria had abruptly dismissed her that morning with the false claim of a doctor's appointment, contradicting her usual insistence that Sarah handle all of Noah's medical visits. The most damning evidence came in the form of the nanny cam footage, played on screens visible to the jury and the courtroom. The black and white video showed Victoria entering Noah's nursery, methodically packing a small bag, and lifting the sleeping baby from his crib. What had seemed like normal maternal behavior took on a sinister cast with the knowledge of what happened next. A separate security camera from the neighboring property, obtained during the investigation, had captured Victoria's Mercedes pulling out of the driveway shortly after she was seen with Noah, then returning less than 30 minutes later without the baby. Throughout the damaging testimony, Victoria maintained a facade of indignant innocence, occasionally leaning to whisper to her attorney or shaking her head in apparent disbelief at the allegations against her. But Lily, watching carefully from her seat, noticed the woman's hands perfectly manicured, adorned with expensive rings, and trembling almost imperceptibly as the evidence mounted. By late afternoon, the prosecution had presented its case, and the judge adjourned proceedings until the following day when the defense would begin their arguments. As they filed out of the courtroom, Lily felt drained but relieved that her part was over. Robert guided their small group through back corridors to avoid the press gathered in the main hall, his hand protective on Lily's shoulder. "You were very brave today," he told her, as Thomas brought the car around to a private exit. "I know it wasn't easy facing Victoria or her attorney." Lily shrugged, downplaying the emotional toll. "I just told the truth. That's all I needed to do." "Sometimes telling the truth is the bravest thing of all," Maggie observed quietly, her wise eyes studying her granddaughter with pride. The trial continued for 4 more days, with the defense presenting character witnesses for Victoria and suggesting alternative explanations for Noah's abandonment, temporary psychosis, undiagnosed postpartum depression, despite not being Noah's biological mother, and even the bizarre claim that she had left Noah in the car temporarily while checking the property for intruders, only to forget his location when distracted by a phone call. None of these explanations adequately addressed the disabled security cameras, the tarp covering the car, or the fact that Victoria had lied about Noah's whereabouts to both Sarah and Robert. On the 5th day, as the jury deliberated, Lily sat with Grandma Maggie in their apartment, trying to distract themselves with a game of cards. Robert had wanted them present for the verdict, but had agreed when Maggie suggested that Lily had endured enough of the courthouse atmosphere. "Whatever happens," Maggie said, arranging her cards carefully, "we know the truth. And Noah is safe. That's what matters most." Lily nodded, though a part of her desperately wanted justice, wanted Victoria to face consequences for what she had nearly done to the baby who now greeted Lily with such joyful recognition, who had become as dear to her as if he were her own brother. The phone rang, startling them both. Lily answered, hearing Robert's voice on the other end. "Guilty," he said without preamble, his voice thick with emotion. "On all charges. The judge has ordered her held without bail until sentencing next month." Relief washed over Lily, so powerful that she had to sit down. "It's over then?" "The criminal case is over, yes. There will still be divorce proceedings, but those won't involve you or Noah directly. We can move forward now, Lily, all of us together." After ending the call and sharing the news with her grandmother, Lily moved to the window overlooking the city. The snow had stopped, and weak winter sunlight was breaking through the clouds, casting golden light across Seattle's skyline. It felt symbolic somehow, the darkness lifting, making way for something brighter. Her thoughts drifted to the events that had brought them to this point. A rainy day, a faint cry, an impulsive decision to climb through a fence. Such small moments that had altered the course of so many lives. If she had walked a different route that day, if she had ignored the sound, if she had been too afraid to investigate, but she hadn't. She had followed her instincts, had acted with courage and compassion, not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And from that single act, a cascade of changes had flowed, bringing her to this moment of transition, of possibility, of hope. In just a few weeks, she and Grandma Maggie would move into their new home with Robert and Noah. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be adjustments, challenges, moments of doubt, but there would also be the daily joy of Noah's smile, the security of Robert's steadfast support, the comfort of knowing that Grandma Maggie was receiving the best possible care. It wasn't a traditional family they were forming, but perhaps that was what made it special. It was a family built on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than mere circumstance, on love that had been tested and proven in the crucible of crisis. Lily's reflection smiled back at her from the window glass, and for perhaps the first time in her young life, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of lasting happiness, not just for Noah and Robert, but for herself and Grandma Maggie, too. Beyond the glass, Seattle continued its rhythmic life, unaware of the small miracle that had occurred in its midst, how a chance encounter had knitted together 4 souls who might otherwise never have crossed paths. How a moment of courage had rippled outward, transforming not just one life but many. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Lily remained at the window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle against the darkening sky. The future stretched before her, no longer a landscape of struggle and uncertainty, but a path illuminated by newfound family, opportunity, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest choice is also the one that leads you home. Spring arrived in Seattle with a gentle persistence, coaxing cherry blossoms into delicate bloom along the city's streets and painting the parks with vivid splashes of crocus and daffodil. In the sprawling gardens of the Bradley estate, the transformation was even more dramatic. Carefully tended beds erupting with color, ancient rhododendrons unfurling their showy blossoms, fruit trees dotting the landscape with fragrant flowers that promised summer bounty. Lily sat on a wrought iron bench near the koi pond, watching Noah toddle through the grass with the determined concentration of a 15-month-old exploring his world. 2 months had passed since she and Grandma Maggie had moved into the east wing of the mansion, and each day had brought new adjustments, challenges, and unexpected joys as their lives gradually meshed with those of Robert and Noah. "Careful by the water, buddy," she called as Noah ventured closer to the pond's edge, his chubby legs moving with increasing confidence. He paused at the sound of her voice, turning to flash her a mischievous grin that showcased his growing collection of teeth. "Lily fish," he exclaimed, pointing to the orange and white koi gliding beneath the water's surface. "That's right. Fish," she agreed, moving to join him at the pond's edge, her hand automatically reaching for his as they crouched to watch the fish together. From the terrace came the sound of laughter, Robert and Grandma Maggie enjoying morning coffee together, a ritual that had developed spontaneously and now anchored their days. Despite the significant differences in their backgrounds and experiences, the two adults had formed a friendship based on mutual respect, shared concerns for the children in their care, and a dry sense of humor that often left Lily smiling at their exchanges. "Look at those two," Robert would sometimes say, watching Lily and Noah interact. "Who would have thought?" And Maggie would nod, her eyes wise and knowing. The universe works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the families we choose are the ones we need most. Life in the Bradley mansion was both simpler and more complex than Lily had anticipated. Simpler because so many of the day-to-day worries that had once consumed her, paying bills, ensuring Grandma had her medications, finding enough food to last the week, had been lifted from her shoulders. More complex because navigating this new family dynamic required constant adjustment, compromise, and honest communication. There had been difficult moments. The first night in their new home, Lily had woken in a panic, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings and seized by the irrational fear that she had somehow abandoned her old life and responsibilities. She had crept to Grandma Maggie's room, finding comfort in the familiar sound of her breathing, the unchanged presence of her grandmother anchoring her amidst the sea of change. Noah had experienced his own adjustment period, occasionally growing fretful or clingy when Lily disappeared to her own wing of the house, not yet understanding why his beloved Lily wasn't always present. They had worked out a routine where Lily joined the Bradleys for dinner each evening and spent time with Noah before his bedtime, ensuring consistency while still maintaining the separateness that allowed her to feel this wasn't charity, but a genuine arrangement of mutual benefit. Robert had struggled too, learning to share parental authority with Maggie regarding Lily's upbringing, respecting the boundaries of their unusual family structure, while still providing the stability and guidance he felt responsible for offering. There had been minor disagreements about curfews, school activities, and the balance between Lily's time with Noah and her own social development. But for every challenge, there had been moments of unexpected harmony. Lily helping Noah learn new words, Robert assisting with her science project, Maggie teaching them all to make her famous apple cobbler, Sarah becoming not just Noah's nanny, but a bridge between the two families, offering perspective and support when tensions arose. Now, watching Noah's delight in the simple pleasure of spotting colorful fish, Lily felt a surge of contentment. This was home now. Not just the physical space of the mansion with its elegant rooms and manicured grounds, but the emotional space they were creating together, the sense of belonging that had been forged through trial and commitment. "Lily, Noah, lunch is ready," Sarah called from the terrace, waving them toward the outdoor table that had been set with sandwiches and fresh fruit. "Come on, buddy," Lily said, lifting Noah onto her hip with practiced ease. "Let's go eat." "Eat," Noah echoed enthusiastically, patting her cheek with a small, slightly damp hand. As they joined the adults at the table, Lily was struck by how natural it felt now. This gathering of people who had been strangers just 6 months ago, now sharing meals and conversation, with the comfortable rhythm of family. Robert's phone chimed with a message, and he checked it quickly, his expression shifting to one of pleased surprise. That was Diane from the foundation. The paperwork is finalized. We can make the announcement next week. Maggie's face lit up with genuine pleasure. That's wonderful news, Robert. I know how much this means to you. Lily looked between them, curious. What announcement? Robert set his phone aside, his eyes bright with purpose. Remember how we talked about finding some way to honor what you did for Noah? Something more meaningful than just helping you and Maggie. Lily nodded, though she still felt uncomfortable with the notion that her impulsive act of rescue required any special recognition. Well, I've established a new charitable foundation, the Noah Bradley Foundation for Child Welfare. It will fund programs for children in crisis, provide resources for grandparents raising grandchildren, and offer scholarships to kids who've shown exceptional courage or compassion in difficult circumstances. Lily's eyes widened as the scope of Robert's project became clear. That's amazing. And that's not all, Robert continued, his gaze warm as it moved from Lily to Maggie. I'd like you both to be involved. Maggie on the board of directors, sharing her wisdom and experience, and Lily, when you're a bit older, helping to select scholarship recipients and perhaps mentoring some of them. Grandma Maggie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Robert, that's an incredible legacy to create from what could have been a tragedy. It's the right thing to do, he said simply. Victoria's actions were born of selfishness and calculation. This foundation will be the opposite, generosity and compassion in action. And it wouldn't exist without Lily's example. Lily flushed, still uncomfortable being the center of attention. I just did what anyone would do. But that's just it, Robert insisted gently. Not everyone would have done what you did. And that's why this foundation is so important. To recognize and encourage that kind of courage. To support those who step up when others might look away. The conversation shifted to more immediate matters. Noah's upcoming pediatrician appointment, Lily's science fair project, Maggie's improving health under the care of the specialist Robert had engaged. But Lily's thoughts remained on the foundation, on the idea that her simple act of following her instincts that rainy day had sparked something larger, something that might help other children and families facing their own crises. After lunch, as Noah settled in for his afternoon nap under Sarah's watchful eye, Lily retreated to the garden again, seeking a quiet moment to process her emotions. She found Grandma Maggie already there, seated on the same bench by the koi pond. Her oxygen tank beside her, but currently unused, a testament to her improving health. I thought I might find you here, Maggie said, patting the space beside her in invitation. This has become your thinking spot. Lily sat, leaning slightly against her grandmother's side in a gesture that hadn't changed despite all the other transformations in their lives. I'm still not used to it, Grandma. The way Robert talks about what I did, like it was something extraordinary. Maggie was quiet for a moment, her eyes following the graceful movements of the koi beneath the water's surface. To him it was extraordinary, Lily. You saved what was most precious to him in the world. But more than that, you showed him that goodness exists even in unexpected places, even when his trust had been so profoundly betrayed by someone he thought he knew. I guess I never thought about it that way, Lily admitted. That's because you've always had that goodness in you. It's as natural to you as breathing. Maggie's hand found Lily's, squeezing gently. I've watched you grow up taking responsibility far beyond your years, caring for me when you should have been cared for, finding ways to survive when others might have crumbled. What you did for Noah was an extension of who you already were. Lily considered this perspective, finding truth in her grandmother's words, yet still struggling with the weight of expectation it seemed to place upon her. What if I can't live up to it? Being part of this foundation, being the person Robert thinks I am. Maggie's laugh was soft but genuine. Oh, my lily flower, you already are that person. You don't have to try to live up to anything. Just continue being your authentic self. That's all anyone could ever ask of you. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the afternoon sun cast dappled shadows through the cherry blossoms overhead. The peace was interrupted by the arrival of Emma Chen, Lily's friend from Lakeside School, who had been invited for a study session and dinner. This place is insane, Emma declared as she joined them by the pond, her backpack slung casually over one shoulder. I mean, I knew you said it was big, but wow. Lily smiled, seeing the estate through fresh eyes. It was easy to forget, in the daily routine of living here, just how extraordinary the surroundings were. Wait until you see the library. It's basically heaven for our history project. As the girls headed inside, Maggie watched them go with a contented smile. This was another blessing of their new arrangement. Lily was finally able to have friends over, to engage in normal teenage activities without the burden of adult responsibilities or the shame of revealing their previous living conditions. The afternoon unfolded in a rhythm that had become familiar, yet never lost its sense of wonder for Lily. She and Emma worked on their history project in the library. Surrounded by leather-bound volumes and comfortable reading nooks, Noah woke from his nap and joined them for a while, helping by stacking and unstacking their index cards while the girls good-naturedly worked around his assistance. Robert arrived home from the office earlier than usual, greeting Emma warmly and taking genuine interest in their project. Dinner was served in the informal dining room, a lively affair with conversation flowing easily between generations, Emma sharing gossip from school, Robert discussing plans for the foundation's launch, Maggie contributing wisdom gained from decades of observing human nature. After Emma left, promising to return the following weekend to complete their project, Lily helped Sarah give Noah his bath, a ritual they often shared that involved more water on the bathroom floor than seemed physically possible, given the size of the tub. "You're getting so big," Lily told Noah as she wrapped him in a fluffy towel, his damp hair sticking up in all directions. "Soon you'll be running instead of walking." "Run fast," Noah agreed solemnly, before breaking into the infectious giggle that never failed to warm Lily's heart. Later, after Noah was tucked in, and Grandma Maggie had retired to her room with a new novel, Lily found Robert in his study, reviewing documents for the foundation. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. He immediately set aside his work, giving her his full attention. "Of course, Lily, come in." She settled into what had become her chair by the fireplace, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "I wanted to thank you. For the foundation, for including me and Grandma, for everything, really." Robert's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that had become more frequent in recent months. "You don't need to thank me, Lily. If anything, I'm the one who should be expressing gratitude every day." "That's just it," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I don't want our relationship, this whole arrangement, to always be about what happened that day. About me rescuing Noah. I want it to be about who we are now, who we're becoming together." Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. "You're right. And that's actually why I wanted to talk to you tonight." He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small velvet box, similar to the one that had contained the bracelet she now wore daily. But when he opened it, Lily was surprised to see not jewelry but a key. "This is a key to the front door," Robert explained. "Not the East Wing entrance, but the main house. I realize that we've been maintaining this separation, which made sense at the beginning, when we were all adjusting, but perhaps it's time to acknowledge that we're becoming more integrated than we initially planned." Lily took the key, its weight significant in her palm. "You want me to be able to come and go between the wings? I want you to feel that this entire house is your home, Lily, not just your designated section of it. I want Noah to be able to toddle down to see you without it being a formal visit. I want spontaneous movie nights and impromptu cookie baking, and all the mundane, everyday moments that families share." The word family hung in the air between them, powerful and resonant. It was what they had been gradually becoming, but neither had quite articulated it so directly before. "What about Grandma? Does she get a key too?" Lily asked, practical as always. Robert chuckled. "Already gave it to her this morning. She suggested I wait until you had some time with your friend before bringing it up with you. That was so characteristic of Grandma Maggie, understanding the emotional weight of transitions, ensuring Lily had space to process each new development in their evolving lives. "Thank you," Lily said simply, closing her fingers around the key. "This means a lot. There's something else," Robert added, his expression growing more serious. "The guardianship papers we discussed before you moved in. I'd like to move forward with them if you and Maggie are still agreeable. Not because I expect anything to happen to her, Her health is improving every day. But because I want to formalize my commitment to your well-being, to your future." Lily nodded, having anticipated this conversation. She and Grandma had discussed it extensively, weighing the practical benefits against the emotional implications. "Grandma and I talked about it. We think it makes sense, but, Robert prompted gently when she hesitated. "But I don't want it to change things between me and her. She's still my guardian, my family." "Absolutely," Robert agreed immediately. "This would be shared guardianship, legal recognition of what we're already creating in practice. Maggie remains your primary guardian in every sense. I would simply have the legal standing to make decisions for your care if she were temporarily unable to, and to ensure continuity if," he trailed off, not needing to complete the difficult thought. "If something happened to her," Lily finished quietly, facing the possibility that always lingered at the edges of her consciousness. "I understand." Robert leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Lily, I want you to know something. This arrangement, you and Maggie moving in, the guardianship, all of it, is not just for Noah's benefit, though he adores you. It's not just out of gratitude for what you did, though I'll always be grateful. It's because you and Maggie have become important to me in your own right. You're part of what makes this house a home again." The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Lily's eyes. After her parents had been gone, she had grown accustomed to the idea that her family would always be small, just her and Grandma Maggie against the world. The possibility of expansion, of new connections that weren't replacing the old ones but adding to them, still caught her by surprise sometimes. "I feel the same way," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "About you and Noah. Like your family now, too, not just people we live with." Robert's smile was warm with understanding. "That's what we're building here, Lily. A family. Unconventional, perhaps, but no less real for that." As Lily made her way back to the East Wing later that evening, the key to the main house secure in her pocket, she felt a sense of completion that had been building gradually over the months since that rainy October day. The journey from that moment of crisis to this point of connection had been neither straight nor simple, but each step had led them here, to a place where the wounds of the past were healing and the promise of the future grew stronger every day. In her room, before turning out the light, Lily added a new photograph to the collection on her dresser, one taken just last weekend, showing all four of them in the garden. Noah perched on Robert's shoulders, Lily and Grandma Maggie flanking them, all of them smiling not for the camera, but at some shared joke, some moment of genuine joy. It wasn't the family she had been born into, nor the one she had expected to have. But as she traced the outlines of their faces in the photograph, Lily knew with certainty that it was the family they had all needed, one formed not through obligation or circumstance, but through choice, courage, and the kind of love that acts when action is needed most. Outside her window, the spring night was alive with possibility, with the promise of growth and renewal. Inside, in the quiet of her room, Lily Morgan, once a barefoot girl running through Seattle's rain-slicked streets with a desperate purpose, drifted to sleep with the security of knowing she belonged, truly and completely, to something larger than herself. A family created not by blood, but by the far stronger bonds of compassion, respect, and unconditional love. 5 years later, the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Seattle glowed with elegant lighting, the space transformed by tasteful floral arrangements and subtle decorations that reflected the momentous occasion. At the entrance, a large banner announced 5th Anniversary Celebration, the Noah Bradley Foundation for Child Welfare. Lily Morgan, now 15, stood at the edge of the room, momentarily taking refuge from the swirl of activity. Her simple but elegant navy blue dress had been chosen with care for this evening, and the silver bracelet on her wrist, the shield charm now joined by several others, marking significant moments over the years, caught the light as she smoothed a non-existent wrinkle from the fabric. 5 years had passed since that rainy day when she'd heard a baby's cry and followed it to a tarp-covered car. 5 years of transformation, growth, challenges, and joy. 5 years that had reshaped not just her life and Noah's, but the lives of countless children across Seattle through the foundation that bore his name. "There you are," said a familiar voice, and Lily turned to see Emma Chen approaching, resplendent in a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair. After 5 years of friendship, Emma remained Lily's closest confidant, the person who had helped her navigate the transition from Rainier Valley to Madison Park, from struggle to privilege, from outsider to integral family member. "Just taking a moment," Lily explained, gesturing to the crowded room. "It's a lot to take in." Emma nodded in understanding. "I can imagine. Seeing all these people here because of what you did, it must feel surreal." "That's exactly it," Lily agreed. "Surreal and wonderful, and terrifying, because I have to give that speech in about 20 minutes. "You'll be amazing," Emma assured her, linking their arms companionably. "You've been practicing for weeks. Besides, nobody knows this story better than you do." Lily's gaze drifted across the ballroom, taking in the assembled guests. Prominent Seattle philanthropists mingled with social workers, pediatricians, foster parents, and recipients of the Foundation's programs. Near the center of the room, Robert stood in conversation with the mayor, his posture confident but not arrogant, his manner that of someone who had found his purpose. The past 5 years had changed him too. The grief that had shadowed his eyes after Caroline's passing and Victoria's betrayal had gradually given way to a quiet contentment. A man who had rebuilt his life around what truly mattered, his son, his expanded family, and the foundation that was changing lives throughout the city. On the other side of the room, 6-year-old Noah was charming a group of donors with his precocious intelligence and infectious enthusiasm. His blonde hair, darker now than it had been in infancy, was neatly combed for the occasion, though Lily knew it wouldn't stay that way long. He had grown into a vibrant, curious child with his father's analytical mind and what Robert often called Lily's compassionate heart. The bond between Lily and Noah had only strengthened over the years. He didn't remember the events that had connected them, of course. He had been too young. But he had grown up with the story, told in age-appropriate ways of how Lily had saved him. "My hero," he called her sometimes, without fully understanding the weight of the word. To him, she was simply his Lily, his big sister in all the ways that mattered, his constant advocate and occasional co-conspirator in minor mischief. "Oh, there's Grandma," Lily said, spotting Maggie across the room, engaged in animated conversation with Dr. Chen, Emma's mother. At 72, Maggie Morgan remained a formidable presence despite her physical frailty. The last 5 years had seen her health stabilize with proper care, though she would always need oxygen support and moved more slowly than she once had. But what she lacked in physical stamina, she more than made up for in spirit. As one of the Foundation's board members, she brought invaluable perspective to their work. The lived experience of raising a child with limited resources, of navigating systems not designed to support families like hers had been. "Your grandmother is trying to convince my mum to join the medical advisory committee again," Emma observed with amusement. "Mum keeps saying she's too busy, but Maggie isn't taking no for an answer." Lily laughed. "Grandma can be very persuasive when she believes in something. And the Foundation could really use your mum's expertise on children's health needs." A sudden commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Sarah Wilson, who had remained Noah's nanny until he started school and now served as the Foundation's program director, was welcoming a group of teenagers, the first recipients of the Lily Morgan Scholarship for Extraordinary Compassion, now in their second year of the program. Seeing her name on the scholarship had embarrassed Lily initially, but Robert had been insistent. "These young people need to know that ordinary individuals can make extraordinary differences," he had explained. "Your story inspires them in a way that a generic name never could." The scholarship provided educational support to teens who had demonstrated exceptional courage or compassion in difficult circumstances. The girl who had organized a food distribution program in her housing project, the boy who had created a buddy system for children of incarcerated parents, the siblings who had developed an app connecting elderly neighbors with teens willing to help with errands and companionship. Lily moved to greet them, her initial shyness giving way to genuine warmth as she welcomed each by name. These interactions had become easier over time as she grew into her role not just as the Foundation's inspiration, but as an active participant in its work. "Lily!" Noah's voice carried across the room as he spotted her with the scholarship recipients. He hurried over